Welcome to Measuring and Monetizing Impact with DSLBD. Again, I'm Caroline Howe from the Innovation and Equitable Development team, and this is our fifth and final event in the Green Bean series for June of 2021. So to start with, when we're thinking about impact, want to give you all a moment to reflect on what you bought or consumed yesterday. Anything? Make a quick list of the food you ate at home or outside, the products you purchased, the services you paid for. And as you're thinking about those pieces, think about how impact, if it did at all, come into your decisions about those products, services, or food. And so for each of those, you can, in addition to thinking about how you made your choices, think about the materials that were used to make it, the place where those materials might have originated, and where you discarded or stored what you purchased. Those are some of the environmental ways that that impact is taking place. So want you to just start thinking about that in your own life, and then we'll translate that over the next bit about thinking about that impact in your business. So, of course, any product goes through the process of extraction, processing, manufacturing, distribution, and use. We looked at this in our first of the Green Bean series of looking at these elements of the consumption cycle, all of which are producing waste, all of which are also recycled and reprocessed. And at each step in your product's life cycle or value cycle, you're also going to be seeing social impacts in terms of jobs, community impact, and ecosystem impacts. So when we're getting started to think about measuring the impact of your business or your products, it's important to start thinking about each part of your consumption chain where waste and carbon emissions are generated. At each part, there's waste being generated. At each part, carbon emissions, water, materials, and energy are being used. And jobs are being created or eliminated based on that business, and communities are being affected positively and negatively. So at each part of your business life cycle and that consumption chain, there are possible improvements for your business and for thinking about how you can measure those impacts of taking that baseline of where it is now and where you can go in the future. So thinking about ways to measure those impacts. There's, of course, direct data, data that every business is going to be capturing and that you can be capturing with a little bit of extra attention to it, of course, your sales data and the purchases. So the purchases that you're making, where the money is going, that your business is spending for its inputs. The sales from your business, and then employment. Every business is tracking your employment. So those jobs created are a significant part of the impact that you're generating. Employment demographics can really be looking at the impact your business is having if you're specifically hiring communities that are either more challenging to employ or to find employment. Folks who are previously incarcerated, returning citizens, or folks who are returning mothers returning to the workforce, folks who are have difference in terms of abilities. You have the ways to be able to capture those demographics, that information in terms of how your business is having impact with the pieces you are already tracking in your business. Then there's some additional ways to capture further data about the impact your business is having. That can be through customer and employee surveys. So thinking about how you could be capturing data from your customers about the impacts that your products and services are having in their lives. Benefit of that, not only are you getting testimonials for future customers, you're also measuring that impact that you are having in the community, and we'll get to later how you can then be thinking about monetizing it. Community meetings or surveys. you can actually be getting a sense of how your business is having an impact on the community around you. Whether you are offering goods or services from a retail location, whether you're manufacturing, or whether you're operating out of your own home, you can really be looking at how your business is positively or negatively impacting that community around you. And the importance of this is getting to see some of those impacts that your business might be having outside of the scope where you traditionally operate or traditionally measure. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is how we look a little bit beyond the scope of what we might traditionally think about our business impacts or our business life cycle, to look a bit beyond that to see where else you might be having impacts. So again, we spent several weeks in this series talking about how to minimize that negative impact, maximize that positive impact, but then looking a bit beyond that to how you can really be looking at the impacts that might not have otherwise be captured in what we've covered in the last few weeks. Then you can be capturing data throughout your supply chain or your value chain in terms of what impact you're having on the buyers that you're buying from. Food processing businesses in the district, many of them are really looking at those impacts, how they're benefiting the farmers that they're buying their food from. And that is a big part of the story of their business. That's a big part of the unique value proposition of their business. So then you can also get into some impact analysis, and we're going to talk about a few modes of impact analysis in the next few minutes, and then transition to some tangible examples of how businesses have used this in their work. So one mode of impact analysis, before I move on from here, want to encourage you to drop questions in the chat if you have them. This is going to fly by. I am always available for any questions you might have on this or related topics by emailing the InnoEd team at inno.ed@dc.gov. But we are going to be moving quickly today, and you will again have the recording and slides after this meeting. So one mode of impact analysis that I wanted to cover is the idea of a life cycle assessment. So a life cycle assessment is a tool that many green businesses, sustainability entrepreneurs use to evaluate the impacts at various stages in a product or materials life cycle. You can do the same for a service. It's slightly different. So we'll be talking for the next few minutes about analyzing the life cycle impact of your product. So it looks at, again, as we did in the first slide of the material flow chain, it's looking at the impacts in terms of energy, water, land, emissions, and social impacts at various stages during a product's life cycle, and understanding where your product or service is having the most positive or negative impact. So it also, life cycle assessment allows companies to compare processes, potentially improve their processes, and it allows consumers to compare products. And if you can demonstrate the life cycle impact of your product, that is adding to your unique selling point or your unique value proposition. So it is a quantitative tool. It's a quantitative assessment. However, it is subjective. There's lots of ways we'll talk about that you may see ways in which different organizations might conduct a life cycle assessment a little differently. So the example we're going to use today, because if you are not currently wearing jeans, I imagine you either own a pair of jeans or have owned a pair of jeans. And so Levi's has done an incredible job in looking at the life cycle assessment of their jeans. And this is not to say that they are the most sustainable jeans, but simply that they have really analyzed the different parts of the impact a single pair of jeans is having throughout its life cycle, both positive and negative. So again, looking through this full material chain from cotton production to turning it into fabric, manufacturing the garment, transporting and distributing the garment, consumer care, recycling the product, and potentially an end of life that is not being recycled. So, and we're going to go through this very quickly. Again, you can spend some more time with these slides, but Levi's chose to do this life cycle assessment because it allowed Levi's to focus on the most significant environmental impacts so they can improve their processes, but also so that they can support engagement with stakeholders. So that's that consumer or producer facing conversations that can reduce the impact of their products, but also increase customer confidence in the sustainability of their products. So in their last analysis, they really looked at consumer markets in different places, where their cotton was coming from, their supplier factories, their fabric mills. Now, not all of us have the capacity to do this for our products, and not all of us need to. But I think that, oh, Donovan is in front of a Levi's store as we speak. Thanks for that direct product view. So they looked at the fabrics, the finishes, and again, these 7 parts of the product life cycle. So this is a really detailed impact analysis, and you can scale this to whatever your product or service is to think about the impacts you're having throughout. So they then turn this into quantifiable numbers. So the total number of water consumed during the life cycle of a pair of jeans, which is 3,781 liters. The land occupation, and then they convert it into numbers that people can understand. So to produce 1 pair of jeans requires the land area of 12 meters squared, which they convert into a number we can understand. 7 people standing with arms outstretched, fingertips touching, would just make 1 side of that square. So it's really a significant amount of land. So why, welcoming thoughts in the chat, why do you think they are trying to demonstrate the impact and making public the impact of a pair of jeans? That it's actually quite a significant amount of water, quite a significant amount of carbon emissions, and a significant amount of land area. Why would they want to communicate that there's actually a pretty significant environmental impact of their products? Let you mull on that as we move through, but I'd love your thoughts in the chat. They recognize that consumer care, the way that customers were using their jeans, and the cultivation of their cotton were the most significant impacts in several different areas. When you look at water, it is very much in the generation of the cotton that the bulk of the water to make jeans is used. And then in the consumer care, the way that people are washing their jeans. From a climate change impact, much more of that is in the production. The manufacturing of the fabric itself is much more carbon intensive than the cotton generation. And then again, consumer care. That's use of washing machines and use of dryers. So they're looking beyond the manufacture of their product to the actual use. Yes, cotton is a very heavy pesticide and fertilizer crop. So they did, in one of these prior slides, reference the eutrophication impact of the production of their jeans as well. Yes, so lots of impacts throughout the life cycle. Land occupation, again, most of the land is being used in the cotton production. So they also looked at how differently consumer habits impacted the actual impact of their products. So in the US, consumers wear their jeans twice before washing them, compared to in China, where consumers wear jeans 4 times before washing them. So since that is such a big part of the climate change, that washing and drying, and the water consumption is in that washing of jeans, this matters a lot, how consumers are actually using your product. Americans use much more water and energy to wash their jeans than consumers in other markets, because we're much more likely as Americans to use a dryer as compared to the US, the UK, France, or China. And so consumers in China mostly wash in cold water and air dry, so a really significant difference in the impact. So why does this matter? It matters to measure so that if Levi's is actually trying to reduce the impact of their jeans, they need to be talking to consumers about how they're using the product. And they need to be talking to consumers about the potential life of their product. And why does this matter? It matters so that they can, again, start to measure, demonstrate that, yes, as a company, we're taking this responsibility beyond the manufacturer of the product to how you're actually using it. It is also to demonstrate that if you are taking care of your jeans from Levi's, you can be wearing and using them for a very long time. So that, we'll touch more on this later, but is increasing their brand value by demonstrating that it is a durable, quality product, and that if you are caring for it in the right way, it can be a much lower impact product. So they looked at how reducing water impact if you are washing every time you wear it versus washing only every 10 times you wear it. Using a line dryer versus using a dryer. And then they looked at some of the impacts of textiles heading to incineration and how are we reducing the amount of jeans that are going to incineration when they could be recycled, resold, and again, creating that demonstration that Levi jeans are a durable quality product. And that can be monetized. That is how they are justifying the cost of their jeans. So some other impacts of jeans, again, feel free to drop your ideas in the chat. But the some of the other impacts of jeans might be the jobs created in each of these places. This was mostly focused on the environmental impact, but they could be looking at each step about how they are creating jobs, creating opportunities, creating more jobs by recycling their jeans. And that is what they've done in looking at jeans recycling into housing insulation so that they're creating jobs in recycling and they're generating more energy efficiency in homes through that insulation. So when you are doing this kind of measurement, I asked earlier why you thought they were communicating both their negative and their positive impact throughout their life cycle. Haven't gotten some responses yet. Feel free to drop them in the chat as we go, but they are justifying, as I said, the quality and durability so they can justify a higher price. They're justifying that it is a lot of work to make a pair of jeans. So it is not $5 when you buy a pair of jeans from Levi's. And so they're justifying that it is higher cost because they're telling you the story of what had to happen in order to make these jeans. They're also sharing both positive and negative impact. So you build that consumer trust. Well, if they're telling you the negative impacts, that must mean, one, that they're trying to reduce them, but two, that they're actually also telling me the truth when they're telling the positive side of their business. We'll see some more examples of this. But in all cases, they also made this beautiful, graphically compelling, easy to understand presentation about it, made it public. So when you're thinking about your impact, it is important to make sure that you are communicating your impact clearly, again, throughout that life cycle, as Levi's did. So an example of VitaPet, VitaPet sells gluten-free, nut-free, and vegan vitamins for your beloved pet. In one sentence, they've made it clear why it benefits your pet. But then in their broader example, they share how they are communicating their impact throughout the life cycle of their product. So we collect pre-consumer food scraps, so it's not people's waste. They're saying pre-consumer food scraps like potato peels that would otherwise go to waste from local restaurants. We know where things are coming from, and we know what the benefit and impact is. You're reducing that waste. We then transform this into pills that we sell at farmers market, along with suggestions on ways to easily integrate them into your pet's diet. So I know that they're selling locally and I can buy locally, so creating that local economy impact. And they're then saying what the rest of their social impact is that we're committed to helping all animals be healthy. So we donate 1 bottle of VitaPet to local animal shelters for every 1 bottle purchased. So I'm seeing their supply impact, I'm seeing their distribution impact, and I'm seeing their social impact in terms of donating to animal shelters. So very concisely, they're communicating their impact throughout that life cycle. Another example of this in terms of communicating the life cycle, this was from several years ago, but remains a powerful example when Patagonia bought a full-page ad in the New York Times on Black Friday and put in this ad saying, "Don't buy this jacket." And they say it is the most sustainable product they've ever made. They have in here the They have the ways in which they are reducing their impact, that they're reducing the impact of their products, that they're prepared to repair your products, let you reuse your products, and that they have a way to recycle it. So they're communicating all of the ways that they're reducing their impact, but they're also telling you not to buy this product. So thoughts on why, as we head to the next slide. They communicated a lot of negative impacts in here. So they communicated that it takes a lot of water to make their jackets, and that even though they're using recycled polyester, it is using a lot of it is producing a lot of carbon dioxide. But they're also emphasizing that this product is exceptionally durable. You won't need to replace it. If you do need, when it does come to the end of its useful life, we'll take it back and recycle it. But as is true of all the things we make and all the things you can buy, this jacket comes with an environmental cost higher than its price. So they were communicating their negative impact, and people have written lots about this case, but some of the reasons why they communicated those negative impacts were to, one, demonstrate that they were trying to minimize them, and they did in the same ad show the ways that they were trying to do that, but they communicated the true cost of their products, the true environmental and social cost of their products, justifying their higher price, that we are paying workers throughout this supply chain a fair wage, that we are doing this work to reduce the environmental impact. That's why it is a higher price. They developed or strengthened their brand identity of durability and quality. We are making this so it will last a very long time, and we think you don't need to buy a new jacket if you already have one of ours. They built trust for conscious consumers, and they communicated those company values. So I've given you a few examples of how companies are communicating their impact, measuring their impact, and why they are doing that. So let's talk about some of the ways you may be having impact and ways that you can measure it. So to start with, thinking about your employees, one of the biggest assets you have in your company. An example from here in DC, Chef Lightfoot from Adrenaline invest in training employees who are otherwise challenging, have challenges of being employed. He trains them, gives them valuable job skills, and then watches them get poached by other competitors in the food system. But instead of seeing this as a frustration, this has become a huge part of the impact that Chef Lightfoot is measuring and demonstrating of the impact of his business. So while he is making food, he is also training employees to then be able to find work in other food sector businesses. This can be a very powerful part of the business model, and it has additional revenue potential, both from the conscious consumers market of actually communicating this to your consumers. We are training workers to be able to find the best next job for them. There are also in the district and certainly federally and other states as well, education grants to be able to fund those businesses that are doing on-the-job training, an essential part of getting folks into the workforce, that on-the-job training. The SNAP employment and training grants are open now, and other grants in the city that cover some of those costs of doing that on-the-job training, or even of covering part of the salaries in the same way that the Green Zone Environmental Program or the Summer Youth Employment Program are encouraging folks to invest in that training for those employees. It's also a core of the DC Central Kitchen model, a social enterprise that gets major food contracts in the city, but the way that they make those foods is by training folks to be working in those kitchens and then having an employment pipeline that is continuously moving those trainees to other jobs. As soon as we're thinking about employees, you also may have volunteers in your community of staff, and many corporations want to volunteer with local social enterprises because it is a mode of employee engagement that people pay for, it's team building, and it may align with their social mission. So recognizing that you are providing a service when volunteers are also providing a service for you. If you are providing an excellent volunteer experience, People can be learning, people can be giving back, and when companies send their employees to volunteer, often they will or can provide some contribution to your organization in addition to that labor for the day. So thinking about how you can communicate and shift your mindset from thinking about, yes, I'm getting help from these volunteers, but I'm also helping them in these ways. So how do you want to engage in volunteerism? Thinking about creative inputs. So if your inputs are perceived by waste as waste by another manufacturer, another distributor, how can you minimize your costs by having those inputs, but also potentially pay you for it? Hungry Harvest, a massive food distribution entity in the DMV, negotiated free space and free inputs from a major food distributor who was otherwise paying thousands of dollars to get rid of food that they could not sell. And instead, Hungry Harvest was able to sell to a waste conscious and cost conscious consumer base that was ready to accept slightly ugly but delicious tomatoes that might not have been otherwise sold to other supermarkets. Another way of looking at your impact is how you can be impacting your competitors even. So during an enormous period of growth of food carts in New Haven, so these aren't food trucks, they're small food carts, styrofoam packaging became New Haven's largest waste stream because all of these carts were distributing their food in styrofoam. But the individual food carts couldn't afford to switch packaging because biodegradable packaging or reusable packaging was much more expensive. But together they could. And so for the food truck that anchored this transition from styrofoam to more sustainable packaging, they lowered their own costs by aggregating demand from the other food trucks in order to reduce that cost for their own inputs, but also created those positive impacts with other businesses. Environmental services, we talked a bunch about this in some of our first sessions, but looking at how you're creating environmental benefit through retaining stormwater or generating renewable energy. Uptop Acres farms on roof space in the district, and they are paid for roof management by companies that have green roofs that otherwise they are paying people to manage just as a green roof. And so Uptop Acres took on the responsibility for managing it. That building gets paid for their stormwater retention and having that green roof. And Uptop Acres is generating their revenue from the roof management, from food, and also events. And thinking about, we talked last week, Benicio shared about 1 for 1, buy one, give one as a major element of social enterprises. So if you're maximizing, if you are providing pro bono services, how can you be measuring and maximizing the impact and communicating that? So if you simply have been giving some of your services away and also selling your services to others, does it make sense to simply communicate that and make sure that you are aligned in buying one and giving one so that every time someone is buying, they're getting that impact message? So when you think about where the funding can come from to monetize your impact, think about strategic benefits. If you are inside of a larger organization and trying to make the case for having more social or environmental impact, think about who is benefiting and who is paying and how you align those two. When you're looking externally for funding, think about what community organizations are also interested in meeting the goals that you are reaching. What other organizations share your challenges and your values, or the challenge you're trying to address through this mode of impact and the values with which you're doing it? Who's currently paying to obtain that impact? Is it the city that's paying? Is it other developers who have to pay for stormwater retention? And what or in the case of Uptop Acres, to maintain those green roofs? Is it food distributors who are currently paying to get rid of certain things that they deem as waste? And then start looking at what grants or funding exists for that benefit and impact that you're creating. If you are communicating to your customers your impact, you're also seeing that brand value increase. And there are these other ways to look at monetizing your impact through those strategic partnerships. time has flown. We are out of time today, but I am very grateful for all of your presence and attendance, and I will be available for a couple more moments to take questions. And otherwise, I hope you all enjoy your day, and thank you for joining us for the final session of this month's Green Business Engagement and Networking Support.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Sure. So when you were talking about developers and finding partners and things like that, one of the biggest obstacles I faced when I was selling green building materials was the quality of my products versus what contractors and developers would pay for. And there's no two ways about it. I mean, if you, especially like I'll use the federal African American Museum. Okay, it was supposed to have been a green project, but you're using paint like Sherwin-Williams. That is really not green. Okay, right. And also like with flooring, you know, I was getting sustainable products, sustainably harvested, but they're looking at price, right?
Right.
So again, you know, a lot of these projects are either DC or federally initiated. So how can you guys, you know, help in our mission by making it more clear as to what is, you know, really zero VOC paint, for instance, or sustainably harvested flooring?
I think that's a great example because so many green businesses struggle with the fact that customers think that they're comparing apples to apples, but really they're comparing apples to oranges, whether that's comparing your sustainable flooring to a low-cost flooring in terms of quality, and that if you are actually comparing a high-quality floor to your sustainably harvested floor, they may be much more comparable. The same with food. If you're comparing what's at a farmer's market to an organic product at a supermarket, an organic product at a farmer's market, an organic product at a supermarket, they are much more comparable than if you're just looking at the lowest cost product at a supermarket and the lowest cost product at a farmer's market. So I think that that's a really important three pieces that I'll say for everybody. And then certainly I'd encourage you to follow up with Mary Lynn at DOEE to think about some of the ways that the work of those businesses can be make sure that the regulations understand what is in place for those buildings that are claiming some of those green product certifications that may not, as you're saying, be in the same level. But three things that I think are relevant for everybody in this. One, that sometimes educating your customer actually means educating customers of your customer. So in the case of if you are selling products to building developers, often your actually education target is renters or the government that is paying for that building to be constructed if it's for a federal office. So thinking about how you are actually educating the customers of your customers if you're selling a B2B product. Another piece in there is, again, making sure that when you're making cost comparisons, that you're comparing your product to the appropriate comparable product. And then I'd also think about how you are potentially bringing other suppliers together to have those conversations. And that is a place where I would bring in and see how DOEE and DOEE's business team can support you in that, where you're really trying to push your peers to be at the same level of saying, we need to be clear that, you know, I can't speak to the sustainability of any given paint, but that a low VOC paint and a not low VOC paint are not the same. And so emphasizing that anybody who is, so that you're really driving the community forward. And like in that food truck example, that you're really pushing the community forward sometimes does mean taking on that leadership role in the community you're in. So I definitely, Mary Lynn, if you don't mind dropping, I know that you are calling in. but you can set up a meeting with folks from DSLBD and DOEE now at the same time by visiting bit.ly, and then all caps INNO_booking, and you'll see an opportunity to set up a time with DOEE and DSLBD. To talk more about that, go ahead, Donovan.
Just want to give a tidbit about her talking about the pricing. Just to add to you were saying, I operated as an estimator, construction estimator for about 5.5 years. And we operated in Prince George's County as the on-call contractor, as well as at other larger contracts in Prince George's County. Sometimes these governments, agencies will put products that they want you know, comparable products or specified products. You can find a inexpensive, you can give them a paper on, you know, a better comparable product. Us as business owners, I always look for the environmentally safe product, even if it costs a little more, because initially you're going to take a hit in cost up front, but over time, a lot of these products have better benefits than other products. You can clean, is better, you know, recycling or removing them is, you know, not damaging the environment. It's like you said, floor tiles. I know you drop some water on some floor tiles after a couple of years, that's asbestos. I'm sorry, you know. And so there are better products out there and things. And if anyone in this group, anyone needs estimating services, I'll buy those pro bono. I'll estimate. Just send your plans over NDA, and I'll do an estimate for you, and even find comparable products for you as well. I just need that nice letter saying I did it, and we can share that on.
Thanks, Donovan. And Donovan did put his contact information in the chat. And I will say on that, really thinking about how you are sometimes, just like we were talking about earlier about expanding the scope of what you're looking at or talking about, sometimes you do need to encourage your customers to expand the scope of what they're considering. That's why all these ways of communicating impact are so important, because if the scope of what a consumer is only considering about their pair of jeans is cost, then they will always choose a lower cost product. But if you're encouraging them and driving them to say, hey, actually on this price tag, I'm also telling you my impact, I am informing the customer that there are other things that they should be considering when they're looking at comparing products. So some of the other things Donovan was saying, and I know the audio was a little choppy, Donovan, but I think what I caught was the fact that you can really be driving some of those conversations around lifespan. Really think about, is this product, whether it's flooring, jeans, a hat, is this product going to just last you one season? Is it just going to last you 5 years if you're looking at flooring? Or am I giving you a product that I'm guaranteeing for 20 years, that it has a lifetime warranty? Or there are some products out there with intergenerational warranties. As long as you have this product, I will fix it. And that is something that creates, again, that changes the brand identity and changes the user. But sometimes you need to push them even further, saying, great, yes, that other product is cheaper right now, but if you need to buy a product every year for the next 10 years versus having my product for those 10 years, that it is guaranteed, I'm certainly less than 10 times more this other product. So getting people to shift the scope of what they're considering and the time frame of what they're considering, so that you're really getting them to compare your product to its competitors in the way that you are. And sometimes that has to be very active in how you're doing that marketing, in how you're doing that communication, and how you're working with your vendors, however you're selling, to be communicating that too. So again, to the green building example and green building materials, sometimes I've seen, where you're actually giving the building developer, here's some great signs and plaques to put up around the office that talk about how great this floor is. I've designed these, I will print them for you. Part of the cost of getting my product is getting this great sign, because otherwise maybe people don't know how great it is that you as the building developer, that you as the building owner invested in low VOC carpet, that I'm actually paying for the health of the employees. How do they know that? Well, because I'm giving you this great sign to put up at every corner of the building. I'm giving you, I'm giving you this logo to put on your website, this blurb about low VOC carpets. And so, in the same way that if I am a farmer selling to a restaurant, I want to give that restaurant, whether it's a window decal, whether it is so that they're getting the benefit of the impact they're having for me. And that's one way that small businesses can really be supporting each other, lifting each other up, is demonstrating the impact that you're having throughout your product and service life cycle.
If I could just jump in real quick, and I'm not trying to bombard the time. I just wanted to reiterate that what you just described, I have done that, okay? And at the end of the day, even when I have had estimators talk about the value of what I was doing, at the end of the day, it's the general contractor, if you're dealing with subs that are pushing the wheel. It goes back to having strong regulation, and I will circle back with your entity about this, about your organization with this, because I have had situations where I had real teak, and you can't get any better than teak as far as, I shouldn't say any better, but teak is so sustainable, okay? Harvest it well. At the end of the day, all they look at is the money. Bottom line.
Absolutely. And I do want to clarify that everything that I've just shared in the past few minutes has been not just for you and your example, because I know that you've been working in this for a long time, have tried those things, but for others that are trying to learn how to do that. And just to clarify, I am with the Department of Small and Local Business Development, but our colleagues from the Department of Energy and Environment are on the line. And Mary Lynn Will here is the business representative for the Department of Energy and Environment. And so definitely encourage, in terms of those environmental regulations, that would be great to follow up with DOE about. And for anyone else on the line who's interested in thinking about the ways of how you're promoting your business, that's something that we would love to talk more through at DSLBD. But really appreciate those thoughts, and hope that, does anyone else have any other questions? Wonderful. Well, I am going to stop the recording.